executives from Wall Street. You don't even have to hardly read the stories. You have Liz Warren's female staffers. This is this great feminist liberal leader, right? Who snubbed Bernie, made 71% less than the males, who's already backtrack, on her Medicare for all, who's already backtracked on she won't take donations from corporations. That's all going up and puffing of smoke.
And let's just add one little thing here. Bernie staffers are now unionized labor, making $15 an hour, represented by the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. Do you see any other politician doing this? A lot of Democrats say, oh, we stand with labor. Really? You stand with labor? No, actions speak louder than words, and Bernie's actions are screaming at you. You want a champion of labor? You've got it in Vermont, called Bernard Sanders.
You got to be deaf and dumb, Democrats, if you can't spot phonies. I don't care, Buttigieg, Harris. If you can't spot an establishment Democrat phony, if you can't see the difference between a genuine progressive like Bernie Sanders and these other half-butt fakes, you got to be worse than deaf and dumb. You got to be complicit.
Yeah.
You have to be in league with the people there that are portraying the progressive platform with the DNC, who are illicitly electing Perez, who are secretly giving the news media, the Washington Post, talking points on how to attack Bernie. You got to be in bed with all those bums.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's the adage coming from the radio show this morning. New people in Maine, out there in New Mexico. Here's what we're saying this morning. Southpaws is saying word for word, forget the Mueller report. Forget it. Look at the Puerto Rican show of unity and how to fight. Follow that. Forget the establishment newspapers, the Washington Post, the New York Times. Take the four so-called ostracized squad, take their words and listen to them completely. Follow them, for crying out loud. If you take Michael Moore's words, who said last night, 12 hours ago, Democratic Party, if you roll out another professional politician, another establishment Dem, you're going to lose again. You're not going to cram down our throats another corporate Dem. It won't happen. It didn't happen the last time. Unless I was asleep, November, whatever day it was. It didn't happen then. It won't happen again. Michael Moore actually says he likes Biden, but he says it will not work. You will not get results with another professional establishment Dem as a candidate.
Yep.
Listen to these people. Please heed the words.
Yeah, and by the way, Michael Moore predicted that Trump would win in 2016.
So did we.
I've got this. This is by CNS News. This is Susan Jones reporting. The hugest mistake Democrats can make is to nominate a safe candidate to run against Donald Trump in 2020, leftist filmmaker Michael Moore told Late Night with Seth Meyers Thursday night. Moore said, quote, I love Joe Biden, but we got to win, end of quote. Moore said Democrats need a street fighter to go up against a bully. And you know which name he mentioned as a street fighter? It wasn't Joe Biden. It wasn't Beto O'Rourke. It wasn't Kamala Harris. It wasn't even Elizabeth Warren. It was Bernie Sanders.
Joe Biden is a candy ass.
Yeah.
He's a bought-out candy ass.
Here's what else Moore had to say. Democrats need more than that to defeat Trump. Quote, so instead of putting all our hopes in one politician to carry the thing, we have to get these ballot proposals on in swing states that will bring out people to vote. End of quote. Moore told Myers his ballot proposal strategy, borrowed from Republicans, worked in Michigan. Here's what he said. Michigan sadly went red for Trump in 2016, but this past November we brought it back to blue. and we kicked out all the Republicans in the state capitol, and we kicked out 2 Republicans congressmen in suburban Detroit and replaced them with 2 Democratic women. So Michigan is now back. Here's how we did it. And we got to do this in states, especially the swing states next year. Ballot proposals brought out the people to vote last November who may not have voted. So we came up with this idea. Let's get 2 ballot proposals. Actually, this is Karl Rove's and Bush's idea. In 2004, they got 14 states to put an amendment on the ballot to propose a ban on gay marriage, and it passed in all 14 states, and it brought out enough people to get Bush elected. We can do this time if we put ballot measures on the ballots. We did it in Michigan with marijuana legalization. We doubled the youth vote from the previous off-year election, and the African-American vote, which thousands had sat it out in 16, unhappy with the choices, came back to vote last November because we had a ballot proposal to make gerrymandering and voter suppression illegal, and it passed. It passed, and marijuana passed, and we had a huge African-American turnout, and that gave us, we got Democrats elected off it. So instead of putting all our hopes in one politician to carry the thing, we have to get these ballot proposals on in swing states that will bring out people to vote. Here's the problem with Michigan, though. If you put out a ballot proposal that the Republicans want to do away with, they can take it up, pass it in the legislature before it even gets to a vote of the people, and then amend it. Because once it goes to the people, they can't touch it.
Right.
They can't alter it in any way, shape, or form, according to the Michigan State Constitution. I don't know how other states work, but that's how it is in the Wolverine state of Michigan.
Darren, let's focus in on the statements that you read Michael Moore made. He's saying that you can't expect a professional politician to win in the 2020 election, Democrats. He's making a call explicitly to Democrats. I read, and I don't have time to read excerpts, I read the history of candidates who the Democrats won with. And I'm going to back up to one called Obama. Obama had a love affair with Americans. They loved him. They loved him. Republicans fall in line. Democrats fall in love. And it's not falling in love when you roll out crusty Joe Biden, supporter of anti-busing, or excuse me, supporter of the racist demagogues in the South when busing was an issue. I could go on. We have gone on in this show. You're not going to fall in love. You're not going to fall in love with these establishment politicians. It ain't going to happen. It hasn't happened in history. It didn't with Jimmy Carter. Who was the establishment candidate that he beat?
Ted Kennedy.
Yeah. You got to say Ted Kennedy was the establishment candidate, wouldn't you?
They primaried a sitting president in 80 because they didn't like Carter. The establishment didn't like Carter.
And you look at the crowd. You tell me if they're in love with Biden when you got 50, 60 people in some hotel someplace, and compare that with a Bernie crowd where people are hanging out of the rafters, where people start to laugh and cry when a bird lands on the podium. We're talking love with these guys, and that's the kind that wins. That's the kind that's won in the past. I love Michael Moore, but man, he hit it right bullseye on this thing.
Yeah. I was telling you on the way down here this morning, I was arguing with these centrist Democrats on Facebook, and it gets tiring. Let me just, for you centrists out there that have never heard this show before, this is your first time hearing it, let me just give you a little bit of background about myself. In 2016, Jack, you were witness to this. Who was the only pundit in this country that correctly predicted a Bernie Sanders win in Michigan? It wasn't Susan Demas over at Inside Michigan Politics. It wasn't Nate Silver at 538.com. It wasn't any of those. You know who it was? This now 50-year-old fat-ass journalist that got pissed off enough to finally sit down and do a radio show. Me. Nobody else. I predicted it. I called it correct. There's my credentials. What's yours?
So, are you saying, Darren, that Michael Moore the maligned, the attacked guy that makes too much money selling books? Nail it on the head? Because I am. I'm saying this is another statement coming from Southpaws right now. Heed the words. It'll happen again, as Darren predicted the last time. It's going to happen again if you give us the fall in line party nominee. And don't tell me Biden's not the fall in line. Don't tell me that's not the one that the DNC, now they may put their money behind somebody else, but they tried him. They tried to derail Bernie, who people are in love with this crusty old, worn out, establishment neoliberal, Joe Biden. That's falling in line. Don't do it.
Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
Rattle them all. There's over 20 of them. You know why there's over 20 of them? Because the Democratic Party has said that superdelegate votes don't count in the first round. But in order to get past the first round, you have to get more than 50%. I believe the actual number is like 53%.
Yeah. Oh.
So they're hedging their bets. So when you stack the field with all these candidates, it's going to dilute the pool. It's like taking coffee, strong coffee, and adding water to it to dilute the strength of it.
Exactly what it is. They got the strategy all figured out. Don't think they knew they had to be careful with the superdelegates. We spotted that the last time. So they've got a new tactic. And just because we support Bernie and say he's the only candidate, the only progressive candidate that's genuine, doesn't mean that we sit here and say the odds are great that the DNC is going to allow him to be made the nominee.
I'll make this analogy right now. Bernie Sanders is the triple espresso. And Biden, Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Beto O'Rourke, Joaquin Castro, Elizabeth Warren, they're all the water that's being added to dilute the strength.
Yeah. Yeah, and like when they say, well, hey, Harris now, or not Harris, but is it Harris or Warren? She's better at the issues than Bernie. Well, she took Bernie's issues. I'll stick with the original copy, thank you.
Yeah.
How do you say just because she can mimic Bernie that she's better at it? She has no legacy to prove her words like Bernie does.
Exactly.
You got to be really stupid not to be able to poke holes in every one of these candidates other than the one.
Mm-hmm.
The only one.
Yep. Folks, you need to turn your brain on. If you haven't turned it on yet, you need to turn it on. If you got friends that have not turned the brain on, make them listen to this show. Make them listen to this episode. Not any episode of Southpaws, this one. Because we're going to hammer it home today. And speaking of, I've got two stories. I got two updates to stories that we've covered in the past. The first one, over the last 2 weeks, we've been talking about Land of Lincoln Goodwill, where the director of the Central Illinois Goodwill announced that they were going to lay off employees. They didn't even announce it. They sent a letter to several employees that they were going to get laid off because Illinois was getting ready to raise the minimum wage. They couldn't afford these people. Well, because of the huge backlash after it hit the media, we have this update. This is from WCIA Television out of Springfield, Illinois. The reporter is Mark Maxwell. A nonprofit director at the local Goodwill hub fired 12 workers with disabilities this month and threatened to fire more. But after tens of thousands of viewers responded in fury, she was forced to apologize, reinstate the workers, and lost her own job in the end. Facing mounting pressure from state lawmakers and U.S. Senators Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth, the Land of Lincoln Goodwill Board of Directors announced on Thursday, which was last Thursday, the 18th, that CEO Sharon Durbin submitted her resignation effective immediately. Now listen to this. She's firing people because they're raising the minimum wage. You know how much she makes a year in annual salary, Jack? Want to take a good guess?
$300.
Well, half of that. $164,849 plus then she gets another $6,000 plus in benefits. She initially wrote a letter to inform minimum wage workers with disabilities they could still come into work for job training, but they would no longer be paid, citing a 2020 increase in the state minimum wage. In an interview with WCIA on Monday, Durbin said tasks completed by employees with disabilities really was not a job and described how burdensome it was for other employees to have to fix their mistakes. This is the head of Goodwill saying this. Unbelievable.